Fitness, and every week I'll be bringing on a guest or at least making a video talking about the sports betting world. This afternoon, joining me is Donnie RightSide. Donnie, how are you, man?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me on today. Interviews. I feel like I'm like the my partner, the big man on campus over here. So let's get at it. Any questions that you have for me, certainly would like to let you know. I mean, you're going to travel probably the exact same path a lot of us getting into this business traveled. So let's have at it today.
Hey, man, you've been doing a great job with your show with Jeff, the late night on campus, right side on campus, a lot of stuff with SBR. And that's really how I met you and found you on Twitter. And just like your stuff, you guys have a lot of good vibes coming to you. And definitely just wanted to come bring you on here and have a good chat. So first off, Donnie, we'll just talk about how you really got into the industry. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, I've always been a sports junkie growing up. Whatever was on TV, Andrew, typically it was sports in my house. Growing up in a northeastern province, or provincial city like Philadelphia, we call ourselves 4 for 4s, meaning like we like the Sixers, the Flyers, the Eagles, and the Phillies, and anything outside of the region, we'll defend our own in that way. But coming up through football was always the lifeblood for me. Played it in midget football, played through high school, played through college, but always had an eye on everything that was going on. I could get into hockey being a Flyers fan. I could get into baseball being a Phillies fan. Those teams essentially didn't have to be good for me to enjoy and love the sports. Being, again, in our area, back when I was growing up, Rutgers, Temple, not good football teams. Penn State, 7 or 8, hours away. I gravitated for it. If you could see up top there, being a Miami Hurricanes fan, just as something to root for. But every sport, I sort of got into it and had a passion for it. When you talk about the first part of your question there, going in and how did I get into the actual business, it was one of those things where all along, most of us, Andrew, coming up, we like to bet on sports if you like sports. It's easy. It's accessible. You have a local book. You can go offshore. You can bet your friends. You have fantasy sports. All that stuff comes into the equation. But to really make a run of it, I wanted to convince myself that I actually like doing it. Of course, when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, going through college, graduating college, getting a job in quote unquote the real world, I'm using, sportsbook.com or, 5 dimes, just betting because the game is on. But I wanted to convince myself everybody usually thinks they're really good at it until you put, the rubber to the road, as they say. And getting into the business, Andrew, I wanted to make sure I really loved it. So I gave myself 1 full year where I would actually cap every day. Didn't even know if I could actually get to the full year, maybe in 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, that I would just get tired of it and say it wasn't for me. The one thing, Andrew, that I found out, the more I did it, the more I loved it.
And that's one thing I found about this industry as well. Every single night there's something to be excited about. Watching your guys' show, you guys seem like every single night there's something to get excited about. There's something that you're very, pumped about, a big upset, and so on and so forth. So I guess my next question to you will be, how does becoming a fan turn into, hey, let's do this? And what's the difference between being a fan and being a handicapper? Do you still call yourself a fan of the teams you're betting on, or do you still say, this is the team that I like, but tonight I'm betting on these teams? How did you make that transition from just being a sports supporter to now you're a full-time handicapper?
Andrew, it's a great question that you asked there, because I figure, with most people, it's hard. Money is money, and that's the first thing you have to separate from being a handicapper and a fan. The hardest thing to do, even to this day, is take a bet against the Eagles, against the Phillies. Let's just say the Phillies are in the NLCS or the World Series, when the other side is the right side, but you want to root for the Philadelphia Phillies. When you get to the point in your, if you're going to become a professional handicapper or just, capping on Twitter and people follow you, when you can make that distinction going from fan to actually betting and winning money and taking a look at the games differently than you would as just a fan, that's when you have arrived. Because I've done it many times. If there's money to be made against the Philadelphia Eagles, I will make it. The one interesting thing is when people will see there is I'm always going to root for the Eagles. Let's just say the Eagles are playing the 49ers, Andrew. It's a minus, 6.5 for the Eagles. And the game's coming down to the wire. The Eagles hold a 4-point lead with San Francisco driving. I'm still rooting for the Eagles with every part of my blood, even if I had taken the 49ers, where I know if they score, I'm going to win my bet. Once you can be able to separate that from, and again, it's a great question, because this is the hardest thing to do. Growing up your whole life rooting one way, to sort of train your mind and your brain to say, you know what? If there's money to be made, I have to take this direction. And it's okay, because I will root technically against my money. but it's almost a double-edged sword because you want the Eagles to win, but at the same time, if San Francisco scores, you get money. As soon as you can separate those two, that's when you know you found your place.
That's a great answer, and I fully agree. And I think that's one thing that a lot of sports bettors or people that are wanting to get into the industry really do have to understand. I can fully agree with that. Last night, first of all, I'm a Montreal Canadiens, took a loss, and I'm a Toronto Raptors fan strictly just because I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like them or anything, but I just, they're very inconsistent. We can all agree, right?
Yeah.
So as someone that's getting into the handicapping industry, I would never have advised anyone to get into that. And to be honest with you, I completely stayed off the game. A lot of people were all over Milwaukee, but just as a Raptors fan and as someone that doesn't really know what's going to happen with that team ever, I just decided to stay off it. So that's great advice, Donnie. I fully agree. It's hard, but
it's the single hardest thing, Andrew. It really is.
So let's just rewind a little bit and just talk about, you mentioned graduated from college, kind of went into the real world, so-called real world with the 9 to 5 sort of thing. Is that right?
Yep, sure. Absolutely. I was graduated right from college. The minute I graduated, within a week, I was working with a mortgage company, and I actually did that for a full decade, punching the grind, making good money. After that, Andrew, I actually I bought my own franchise, which was a sandwich shop, and had that for additional 8 years. So, as young as I actually look, I'm not actually that young. I'm going to turn 40 a little bit later in this year. But, being in the gambling game, I feel as if, reinvigorated, like I'm back in my mid-20s. But yes, after that, but before, I know the next question you're probably going to ask is, how did I actually go from, 9 to 5 job transitioning into a full-time handicapper? Again, Andrew, it took a long time to do because I had to know that the money was going to be right, which again, when you start, it's not very much. And you feel like king of the world the very first time you get a PayPal, ringing, and that says somebody actually bought your picks, where you would be a quote-unquote professional. I started and opened up selling picks, selling plays, being online with a website in early 2013 with RightSideValuePlays.com, which I still own that website, but I graduated as, my name evolved and changed. In the business, you like to be known by some sort of a handle. RightSide Value Plays a little bit longer, so it just became Donnie RightSide. It's just a short moniker, which I then became to the website, DonnieRightSide.com. And I've had that for a few years there, figuring, building the following, because it does take a long. If you follow me on Twitter, it's hard to go just from 200, 300, 400 followers all the way up to what I have now, which is not a ton, about 4,100. But again, putting in the time, I have over 46,000 tweets on there, which you try to build that following long term. And once you can make that breakaway where, it's a big leap and you say, I'm going to go out this professionally full time. Number one, you better have a professional approach to it and a game plan. And number two, you better be knowing what you're talking about. Because if you see us, Andrew, and watch our shows, Jeff loves soccer, very fluent on soccer, which I'm not. So I know when to take a back seat, and I'm not going to put that out there. One of the easiest things I can tell handicappers are looking to get into the game, pick specifics that you're good at and that information on, and you can sound reputable, because I would never want to go on a soccer show, or even, I love hockey, but I'm not going to be able to get into it, like with Ian and yourself, debating how Edmonton's, third line or their penalty kill is going to go up against somebody else's, because within 3 minutes, you would feel me out as being a fraud. That's the one thing in this business you want to stay away from. Just stay in your lane, do what you do, is the best advice I can give on that.
Great advice. And, just to expand on what you were saying about how you gradually grew, starting off with the low amount of followers on Twitter and you grew up, if you could just talk about social media strategies. I mean, we don't want to get too businessy here, but really talk about how you grew.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, way before your time and even before my time, the biggest thing is, if you ever saw the movie maybe Boiler Room or something like that, that's what it was, really the Wild Wild West in handicapping, where people will set up boiler room shops with 12 or 13 quote unquote salespeople. And if it would be a Monday Night Football game, let's take an effect again. West Coast, it's going to be the Niners. East Coast, it's going to be the Eagles. If a number rang from a area code that was in California, they would give those plays, the 49ers. The same thing east of the Mississippi. If it rang, they would give the Eagles. Figuring if they took 10,000 phone calls that night through radio advertisements, 5,000, if it was evenly split, they would have winners and losers, and they would prey on the 5,000 who thought they were geniuses, that, oh my goodness, you had the Eagles. That was such a great call. What do you have? Well, buy my package, $1,000 a month, we'll do it. That's a lot harder to do in this day and age, Andrew, just because of social media, which again, even if you were capping in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, Twitter wasn't very big until you got around 2010, 2011, and more people got on that. The best part about Twitter to myself, it's a fantastic handicapping tool. And getting into a little bit of specifics, I love football season. I love college football. I love the NFL. The one thing, just using Twitter, if we can talk how to build off social media, is make back contacts. There's a lot of people out there like yourself, Andrew, just getting into the sports. Let's just say Bowling Green and the MAC. They have a Thursday night football game. There's some injury stuff. Chances are there's somebody at Bowling Green who's like an SID or a student SID who's just there covering the game, has 300 followers on Twitter, and you hit him and say, hey, Smith was, dinged up in the last game there. Any ideas? Like, yeah, just got to the stadium. Looks like he's warming up with the first team. Looks like he's going to give it a go. That's information that maybe Las Vegas wouldn't have, the average handicapper wouldn't have. So I always look to make as many contacts as I have, because you never know, Andrew. The same thing if you like hockey. If somebody tips you off and says, hey, so-and-so, Sidney Crosby actually has the case of the flu. One of my guys in Pittsburgh just told me that before it's widespread, instead of Pittsburgh being minus 190, they might drop down to minus 155, and you can sort of steal that line and go with that. But social media, building a following and gaining contacts and information, it's not something that you could do overnight, but if you stick with it and people know you're honest and truthful, they're going to follow you. And also on the business side of it, use it as a tool, as a handicapping tool. A lot of stuff comes down on Twitter immediately before maybe your local bookmaker can make a move. Use that to your advantage.
Great stuff, Donnie. Well, let's kind of turn the tables into research now.
Sure.
You hear a lot of handicappers say, I'm working on this card. Tomorrow's going to be a great day. Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. All those quotes you hear, what exactly does that mean to you personally? If you're telling me on a late night in campus, someone's listening to you, someone's going to watch this video right now. When you say you're looking for some picks tomorrow, when you're doing some research, what does that mean?
Yep. A lot of the times, and you'll see me in April, I've been very successful this month and have been in the past. I'm not so much as a capper in April. I'm just using the information that's provided to me to sort of turn the information back on the public. Because the one thing I've known for years and years and years of doing this, Andrew, it's probably the same thing in hockey and other sports as well that you track even in football. The eyes do deceive. If I don't have background research on something that I want to put my money on, I can't offer that as a service and say, you know what, I really like this game. Because if a pitcher was really good last year through the month of September, this is 6 months later, a full off season. Maybe he wants to get paid. Maybe he already got paid. Maybe there's a little twinge in his shoulder he doesn't want anybody to know about. I need to see the complete month of April before I start putting hardcore numbers into the situation. The same thing goes with football. I'm documented on handicapperswatchdog.com. In the last two NFL seasons, I'm 47-27, which is about 64%. And the reason being there, I said, well, you don't have that many plays. You don't have that many strike points. Well, I mean, not many cappers who actually sell picks are willing to sit out the first month of the sport, knowing that's when everybody's going to want to go head in. So the stuff that I've picked up over the years, just simple stuff, taking a wait and see approach, saying if everybody likes this game, well, why does everybody like this game? I'm going to revert back and really get into the numbers, going back to something where they say, hey, Donnie, tomorrow, you like the card. Why do you like the card? There's a lot of indicators that go in. And even if we can apply this to April baseball, June baseball, October football, whatever it might be, there's a lot of combinations that you want to take a look at. I'm a big numbers guy. I want to know where the public is going and why the public is going in one direction. Look, you can't just fade the public, because if everybody did that, Andrew, same thing with whatever sport you're betting in, we would all just fade the public. There would be no Las Vegas and we would all be millionaires. You have to know why some of these lines are moving, what information you have. Maybe it's a key injury. Maybe the coach said, in a total, you're like, hey, look, we're really going to slow this game down, which would bring a total in basketball from 220 down to 210, whatever it might be. But the indicators that I like to look at is why the public is betting on a game. What could be the reasoning? Is there something I missed with an injury? And more importantly, what do I see myself and what my numbers tell me? Because if you have an overall consensus for yourself, say, hey, the public's going against this one, the money's going against it, and I cap the game myself, I'm sort of leaning towards going against the public. Those are the plays that you look for. And time again over the years, Andrew, you'll learn. And when you see certain indicators that you say, you know what, I remember back in 2013, this didn't work. It's working now. To go back and get that knowledge that you had from the past and bring it to the future. Because we and Jeff always joke around. And I say the stubborn go broke in this business. Meaning if you were saying, man, like you had a trend in hockey, Andrew, that said, unders with the team that we're playing only 2 games in this week or whatever the stat would be is 22-5 to the number. And the next 5 games all lost, you bet it. Well, you're going to continue to bet it. Well, sometimes it's time to jump off those trends and reevaluate the situation. When you can become that complete handicapper and put all that into the pot, that's when you know you're going to have success.
Donnie, I was joking around with Ian about how in previous years in hockey, during elimination games, the under was the play. Nowadays, if you're betting NHL, most of the time you're going to want to bet over the total when it's an elimination game, because both teams are coming out firing a lot of goals. I mean, the goaltending is still good, but when both teams are so desperate, one team is trying to save themselves, one team is trying to close the series out. It's kind of just changed ways. So it's a good point, and it kind of spirals me into my next question for you. It really is, as a handicapper, when you kind of got into this full time and taking it very seriously, do you ever feel pressured to play too many plays? I mean, I feel like, what would you rather? If I was buying your picks, Donnie, I'd rather you give me 2 of your good ones than give me 8 picks and only hit 3 of them. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather you do that. So, I mean, give me your insight on that. That's one of my big questions of the day.
It's a fantastic question that you have there, because most people that run a service feel the pressure that you have to put out plays and multiple plays, because gamblers by nature, nothing against them, have a little bit of a degenerate tendency. That means if the game is on, if I lost the 7 o'clock game, I need a 10 o'clock game. If I lost the 10 o'clock game, hopefully you have something for soccer for me in the overnight in Europe or whatever it would be. It's a great question. The one thing is, there's 2 types of cappers on the planet. There's ones that are going to sell packages and hope to do well and feed on that need as, I want 5 to 6 plays a day. There's other cappers like myself that take the exact opposite approach. Like, I do everything I have, Andrew, third-party documented. That means, being completely transparent. I always post when I win on Twitter. I always post when I lose on Twitter. Sometimes they say, running a business, that might not be the best marketing capability, because a lot of new fish are coming into the Twitter ocean, so to speak, each and every day. Some people just post nonstop winners, and you would get the feel as if you didn't know that much, like, wow, like this guy, all he does is win. I have to, give a phone call. It's the same thing with the followers there, which the good part about is you have like Twitter checks on there. Like, if you're new to Twitter and you see a guy who has 1,100 followers, Andrew, versus a guy who's 47,000. Well, when I first got on Twitter, I didn't know I can spend $10 and gain like 35,000 followers. So you can throw smoke and mirrors, but at the end of the day, it's going to catch up to you. Myself, I've always prided, even when I got into the business, there was a lot of things I tried that didn't work, tried other things that did work. And what I settled in over the past 2.5 years, Andrew, that less is more. When people come to me and say, well, how many plays do you have? I ask the simple question. I say, are you paying me just to give you action, or are you going to pay me because you want winners? It's a lot better. And I found that in different cases, if I go in football season, let's just say 4-3 over a 7-day period with normal juice, you're going to make a little bit of money. But sometimes people would rather you go 4-8 because they had 12 games and they don't, spend that much money on a game, and maybe you can get hot. The followers that you have and the continuance of bringing people in is key. You have to explain to them up front what your strategy is, and it doesn't fit everybody. If you say, well, I don't want to pay because you're only giving out maybe 1 play a day in baseball, some people, that's not for them. But I tell those same people, which again, Andrew, they've been with me, some people 2, 3, and 4 years. They know exactly what they're getting. Say, hey, if Donnie's going to pass on a play tonight, and they might come to, hey, look, I know you're not on the game, San Diego and Oakland tonight. Who do you like on this game? I'll weigh in and say, hey, look, I didn't like this game because of this situation, but I can see where your point of view is, just to bounce it off. But they know me by now, where I'm just not going to fire on a play to give it out. Baseball season is a little bit easier because of the amount of games you have every single day. Football season, it does get a little bit tricky, because if somebody says, hey, Donnie, I want to buy your NFL package. Well, to be honest, there's been some weeks in the NFL, Andrew, I have 1 play. I mean, 47 and 27, that's 2 full seasons, 32 weeks of regular season football, plus playoffs and Super Bowl. That's all I had, but you're paying me to go 47 and 27, not 50 and 81. So to me, my motto always has been, less is more, and take it as a financial approach. If you invested your money with a 401k guy, Andrew, and he calls you up, and even if you're young, you're just getting out your job, say, hey, I have $10,000 in my 401k, I'm going to roll it over to you. What can you do for me? And he goes, Andrew, got a great tip for you. We're going to put that $10,000 to work tonight, and I think I have a home run. And he calls you the next day. You call, say, well, what happened? He goes, yeah, it happens. It happens. Well, you don't have any money left. Would you rather the guy that says, give me $10,000, and at the end of the year, I'm going to give you back $12,000? That's more of my approach and philosophy in gambling.
Absolutely. Next question I really have to ask, kind of a different question really, but just when you're out on the streets or you meet someone new and they ask you what you do for a living, do you tell them the whole backstory about how you got into it? Do you say, I'm a gambler, I'm a handicapper, I'm a social media guy? What are you?
It's pretty funny when people ask me, like, I'm very nonchalant. And again, being doing this a long time, it's funny, even when I'm still around like my family members, they technically don't understand really what I do. Like, hey, how would your show go? Or what do you have to have 3 shows today or whatever? You know, half of them think I'm a bookmaker and I'm taking the bets and it's something super illegal I'm doing. And you try to hold it down because even when you meet new people and friends of the family, like my father's, you know, you wouldn't be telling from the interviews, but I'm more of an introvert than going out and talking and being around everybody. My father's the opposite. He can meet somebody in 3 minutes and say, hey, here's my son over here. Guess what? You know, he's one of the best gamblers that I ever seen out there. It's sort of like puts me in the back, but I'm more of, you need to get it out of me than me just, you know, shaking hands or I'm in an Eagles game and they say, hey, you know, what do you do for a living? I'm more basically saying that I'm like sports marketing. You know, I do stuff for marketing and sports on websites. I very rarely just like introduce like, hey, you know, I'm a gambler and I sell sports picks and I'm a tout. So you more or less have to give it out of me. It's just the way it is. Maybe it's not the best business technique, you know, where I'm not just handing out business cards at every sporting event and saying, you know, take the Eagles second half here and thank me later. But yeah, more or not, I usually use the terms because most people don't understand it. So I like to keep it as limited as I can possibly.
Awesome, Donnie. All right. Well, next question right away, rapid fire. Don't think about it.
Yep.
3 main tips you'd give anyone watching this video in handicapping in general.
Handicapping in general, have a bankroll and stick to it. Number 2, don't just fire on everything you have. And the best indicator I can tell everybody is imagine yourself, even if you're not a good handicapper, Andrew, and you say one day in the NFL, there's 15 games. Pick your favorite game that you like and stick to it. More times or less, you might win Sunday, you might lose the next Sunday, you might win the next Sunday. Just take a less is more type of approach in that situation. And number 3, again, gets back to my original point. Just be real. If you don't know what you're talking about, there's no sense in going down that path. Again, if you ask me like serious hockey questions on, you know, what I think about, you know, this team's power play or how they play on the road, you would find me as a fake within 3 sentences, and that's not what the people want. They want to be, you know, encouraged to bet the game, but they want to know, like, you know what, Andrew, that makes sense. That was a great breakdown of that Boston Bruins game. You know what? I'll be in touch with you, as opposed to you, you know, mispronouncing the coach's name, or maybe the coach got fired 2 years ago. You're still calling the coach the same way. Just be real and stay in your lane and stick to what you know. You'll go a lot farther in this business.
So is it fair to say that baseball and football are your 2 sports, really?
I mean, I love to cap college basketball, but college basketball is the hardest because you're not only dealing with teams and kids, you're dealing with point spread numbers and point spread numbers that can fluctuate just based on if a referee is having a bad day, if your team doesn't shoot free throws. I love to bet the NFL football, bet NFL football because it brings a lot of what I know, my background into play. I know what it feels like, you know, to have a tough game the week before. Like if you play Seattle on the road and then you come home, you're worn out because the Seahawks are physical. They're going to bring it, and you probably lost that football game. I know how it feels that when you have an easy game coming up with, you know, your rival right behind it. I know what that feels like, saying, let's just get through this game and, you know, we're going to worry about the next game after it. By far, to me, the easiest sports that I cap would be football and baseball. Although I love to cap basketball and have success with it, by far my hardest sport to do would be college basketball.
Okay, and now I'll get into something that a lot of people are probably curious about and want to get into. And 162 games in the season, gee, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to make some money. Yeah. But it might not be so easy. So it might be an open-ended question, but just tell us a little bit about betting in the sport of baseball.
Yep, betting in the sport of baseball is simple to me. I have a strike zone that I like to use. And again, I wish the strike zone had already started 2 weeks ago because April's been really good to me. I'm not selling any packages because, again, I'm not going to say, you know I have an exact trigger. What I'm doing this year in baseball is working really well. If anybody follows me on Twitter there, the plays are up each and every day of exactly what I do. But my strike zone, the perfect strike zone, goes from about May 1st and shuts off right around that 3rd week of August. And they say, well, Donnie, why don't you, what's the difference? Don't Vegas doesn't really know what the lines are in April or September. That's not really what I look at because I like to see what the public is doing and bet against the public. It all makes sense there. But what I like to know is in May, June, and July, teams, for the most part, 90% of them know what they are at that point. The starting rotation is settled. The hitting, 1 through 8, 1 through 9 in the American League is settled. The bullpen setup guys are settled, and you know who your closer is. And you haven't gotten marching orders, Andrew, from the front office saying, all right, we're completely out of it. So let's, just try out the 21-year-old Dominican in the bullpen and see how he does in the 7th inning of a tie game. It's much more of what I call betting in a vacuum. Everybody still thinks they're in it. Everybody still thinks they have an advantage, which does change a little bit after the All-Star break. Coming another 2.5 to 3 weeks after that is the trading deadline, because once August hits, everybody shifts. You have the go-getters who are looking to make that playoff run, and you're going to have the cellar dwellers who are selling off their team and going back into the basement. That's when those numbers get a little bit convoluted at that point after the All-Star break, because if you're seeing some numbers today, Andrew, let's just say Oakland is a minus 141 or Oakland is getting 141, depending on the situation, that might move 30, 40, 50 cents if this same game is played in August. I like to take the parameters once they hit May of you have a full month to look at. Starters have 4 to 5 starts. Batters, the weather's turning warmer. It's a much more comfortable environment. So going through the season, yes, there is a lot of games, 162 games, but you have to pick your strike points. And what I've learned in the past is April usually doesn't work out for me, and neither does September with all the call-ups. I like to make my money May, June, July, and early August, and then we shut it down and start looking at football season. Not because we can't make money, Andrew, but because I know from past experience, my numbers sort of go blank once that 3rd week of August hits.
Got a little phone call interrupting me there.
Hey, busy man over there, right? Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll head into baseball. I'll talk about teams that have surprised you so far. I mean, I know it's early. It's April.
Yep, sure.
Teams that are looking good. Again, I'm a Toronto Blue Jays fan.
Mm-hmm.
They're off to an awful start.
Man.
Jeez, what is wrong with them? They can't hit a beach ball into the ocean with the way they're batting. But one thing I actually do want to ask you, Donnie, that I think a lot of people might be curious about as well, is starting pitchers versus bullpen. And I think a lot of people that don't have a lot of time on their hands to do the research, they'll just, hop on their app, hop on online websites. Oh, look, Chris Sale's pitching. Maybe just take the Red Sox or whatever,
Yep.
And it's just an example there. But a lot of good people that I listen to on their insights, and that includes you and Jeff, they talk about the bullpen and really tell us about how important that actually is.
It's extremely important when you're looking at a game, because a bullpen primarily, if you're looking at what a quote-unquote quality start is in Major League Baseball, it's about 6 innings, giving up 2 or 3 runs. But you say, wait a second, that's only 2/3 of the game. It's like in football, if you equate it, special teams is still 1/3 of the game. That's a big portion of it. If you're avoiding the bullpen, you're avoiding maybe a big bonus or a negative for yourself. Last year, Andrew, throughout baseball season, a lot of the times I thrived on totals, because you can say, hey, if you have a tomato can, which is what I call a bad pitcher on the mound, and a bad bullpen, it's like that powder keg you like to use. But if you have a power pitcher out there who you say, he's either going to be boom or bust, get a lot of strikeouts, he might give up 3 runs over 6 innings, and then that Detroit bullpen moves in, you might be able to pick up 2 or 3 more innings if you're betting team totals or overs. But another key that I looked at baseball season is, I call it myself, Andrew, is betting in a vacuum, and that's the first 5 innings, where Chris Sale is going to give you 5 innings. Now, if you're looking at betting a first 5 to a full game, let's just say, Andrew, Chris Sale gives up 7 runs in the first 3 innings. Well, it's a good chance you not only lost the first 5, but even if you bet at the full game, you're going to lose that anyway because he gave up 7. And what I mean by that term betting in a vacuum is I know exactly who's on the mound, both away pitcher and home pitcher. I know the exact lineup. Very few people get pinch hit for in the first, 3 to 4 innings. I can have some good, honest, hardcore analytic information on how that lineup does versus this pitcher, how this lineup does versus this pitcher, and not have to throw in, well, maybe the closer's not available tonight. The 7th inning guy, we're going to try him in the 6th inning, or a manager's going to go complete rogue and bring his closer in like the 7th inning to try to get out of an inning. Betting in a vacuum just simply means that first 5 innings, you're taking the bullpen and removing from that equation, and you're just going to bet on how that starting pitcher goes down with that lineup, whether it be home or away, winds blowing in or out. You take that out of the equation because, yes, your original point is if you leave out the bullpen and you don't have a good one, hey, case in point, Chris Sale, dominant through 8. They only backed him with 1 run. Should be enough. Kimbrel gives up the solo home run. It's 1-1. And now a complete coin flip on a game where you had a big favorite in Chris Sale. Now you're just saying, I hope my bullpen comes through for me. So you might want to look at the first 5 innings. But yes, Andrew, avoiding the bullpen and not looking at that, as a lot of gamblers don't, that's going to cost you money in the long term.
Great stuff. All right. Well, to wrap things up, Donnie, we'll just get you to tell us some things that you want people to know about you, and maybe at the end of your statement you can let everyone know how they can find you, reach you on Twitter, and etc.
Yeah, yeah. Anybody watching the video again, Andrew, getting into the business, like I know you're breaking in great steps there with SBR. It's hard enough just to get on Twitter and have anybody, but it's good to be with a nice company. I know you're right in that lane right now of hockey. Stick with that, and the more knowledgeable you are, reaching the most people that you can reach, that's how you build a following and people know you're real. They'll come on the chat boxes. And in this business, it doesn't matter who you are. I always consider myself a nice guy. If you follow me on Twitter, I don't have any beefs with anybody. I don't try to sidestep anybody or, if somebody lost a game, retweet it. Are there people that we don't like in the business? Sure. But I found you go a lot farther by just staying in your lane, putting your content out, worrying about your information that you're giving and moving forward. And again, it's great that you're doing these videos because I'd like to bring up a little bit of a point. Way back in the day, Andrew, I did Blog Talk Radio and Spreaker. I could tell you if I had 1 or 2 listeners 5 years ago on some shows where I would do an hour by myself, not taking any questions, and they said, well, why would you do this show? Or why would you do that show? Or, why would you do a show with an up-and-comer in the business? There's not 5,000 people following this person or here. If one person hears you and likes what you have to say, you never know who you reach and you never know who's watching, because if you do a good show, maybe in a couple of years when sports gambling, especially in the United States, is legal, they say, you know what? I'm starting up a company. Andrew is fantastic. Give him a call and see if he wants to work with our company and do hockey stuff or baseball, whatever it is. So if you take a professional approach at everything you do and do as much multimedia as you can, Twitter, Facebook Live, do your own Facebook Live. In the middle of a game, go on Twitter. Even if 3 people watch and you say, I'm going to break down this hockey game at the end of the first period, one of those people might watch in your show. He retweets it to somebody else who watches it saying, you know what? Andrew's really good at what he does. I can't stress that enough because somebody is watching you at all times, even if it's only one person. Just go ahead and give your best effort. If you're knowledgeable, you're going to make it in this business. And to follow me at Twitter on at RightSide VP. Facebook, I don't really use that much. Donnie RightSide.com is my main handicap at home. I'm also going to be on tonight with my good friends at trendbetting.com. Been with them a lot of years, but the more sites, the more available you can be, Andrew. If anybody out there is watching and wanted to get into this business, just be real and continue to do it. Because again, practice makes perfect. If nobody's listening, it doesn't matter. You just did an hour of practice doing a show that maybe nobody tuned into. Wait a couple years when you get good, and they say, man, this guy sounds like he's a 20-year vet or 20-year pro at this. Meanwhile, it was just you putting in the time.
Great stuff, Donnie. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For everyone watching weekly, feel free to subscribe. Come back to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at McGinnis McGinnis Picks. I see Donnie tweeting all the time. I'm trying to get into tweeting as much as possible about games. Donnie's a great follow. Once again, Donnie, thank you so much.
Hey, no problem at all. It's a lot of fun being on there. And again, we'll go back and forth on Twitter. If I can leave you with another tip on that, Andrew, when you're live watching a game, I know you know what you're talking about at hockey. Blast out 30 tweets during any one of these playoff games. The people will eat that up. You get the good back and forth, and that's how you'll make it. But great time, Andrew. True professional. And hey, hope for some big things for you here in the future as well, buddy.
Awesome. All right, Donnie, have a great night.
You got it, buddy. Take care.